I was reading two quite different things on the same day recently, one for work and one for pleasure. But it just so happened that each included comments about how most of us do not think enough about what it is that we do when we read. The first was a book by the Australian writer Gerald Murnane, who said about himself, "I discovered early in life that the act of reading is much more complicated than most people seem to acknowledge." The second was an essay by the American Sanskritist Sheldon Pollock, who began an essay entitled How We Read, with the observation that to ask about how we read may seem like a silly question to many, since reading is something like walking, that we do without much thought once we learn how. Do we ask ourselves what it means to read when we sit down with our coffee and morning newspaper? Of course not, but we might well, because it is no straightforward matter. I suspect that these two comments came together so forcefully in my mind because I was thinking, far from the first time, about a statement that John Strong made 3 decades ago about Buddhist life worlds. In my view, Buddhism, as it is popularly practiced, Strong said, consists primarily of deeds done and stories told. That is, of rituals that regulate life both inside and outside the monastery, and of legends, myths, and tales that are recalled by, for, and about the faithful. Strong elaborated on such stories that are recalled by, for, and about the faithful by adding that they can be thought of in terms of what Roger Bastide, in a very different context, called Belvedere phenomena, compilations of traditions that reveal a broader context, that enable one to see a whole surrounding countryside in all of its various aspects, doctrinal, sociological, ritual, soteriological. I confess that I didn't particularly like this comment when I first read it, and John Strong has reminded me since that I told him so. If I try to understand now what I didn't like about it then, I think it was because I didn't know what a belvedere is, and I didn't bother to look the word up in a dictionary. I simply, and wrongly, assumed that it was a fancy word for a place where one could see a whole surrounding countryside, something like a scenic viewpoint on a highway where one pulls off to enjoy a vista for a few moments, only to get back into the car and continue on one's way. The metaphor struck me as naive, possibly even suggesting that stories enabled one to see, simply and directly, Buddhist life worlds as if they were right in front of one's eyes, like a whole surrounding countryside, without any of the difficulties of historical or ethnographic reconstruction, and without any efforts of imagination, inference, and interpretation. It smacked of positivism to me, which at that time was a ready-at-hand term of abuse in certain sectors of the humane sciences. The contents of my reaction were not wrong. It is still the case today that no one should ever be complacent about under-acknowledging that, as Sheldon Pollock has put it, sense-making becomes more complicated, becomes more of a problem requiring second-order reflection, the further in time and space the origins of the text are from the reader.